We have with us Sridhar Vembu, and we are extremely excited and thrilled to have you here. Who graduated from IIT Madras in '89 and was going to create the most exciting venture of India, Zoho Corporation. And I think you are one of the pride of IIT Madras. And I think who better else can have a conversation with Sridhar is our own Professor Mahesh Panchagla, Dean of Alumni and Corporate Relations, a great supporter of the IIT MA, and we're very happy to have you both with us. Over to you, Professor Mahesh, for an exciting conversation with Sridhar Vembu.
Welcome, Sridhar, to this conversation, and thank you, Lata and IIT Ma, for having us all. Like Lata said, Sridhar doesn't need an introduction, but I want to start us off with the last line from from the citation of his Distinguished Alumnus Award. It says, for his commitment to originality, his willingness to navigate uncharted waters in the entrepreneurial space, and his continued dedication to building an equitable, accessible, and socially responsible corporation, IIT Madras and its alumni are proud to confer the Distinguished Alumni Award upon Dr. Sridhar Vembu. Sridhar, that sums up what you've done, which is a phenomenal success in this day and age. So I want to, in keeping with the theme of the conference, driving the new normal, I want to talk about entrepreneurship in this new normal. Let's talk about what is it that has firmly affected and changed entrepreneurship forever. Uh, let's start. Can you lay out your thoughts on that, please?
Yeah. So I'll actually start with where I am right now. I'm actually in a small village here right now in Tanjavur district. This is actually closer to where I was born, and not in Tenkasi, which is my other village. So I'm actually now traveling between rural centers now. We are opening offices all over, and we have about 10 people already working here, and we're planning to expand significantly here. And this is actually part of the new normal for us at Zoho now. The new normal is we have decided most of our jobs will create in rural centers now. And we'll pay the same pay scale as in Chennai, but most of the jobs will be located here. And the reason, as I was explaining to a colleague this morning, as I said, in a rural economy, even if 1 or 2% of the jobs are our kind of jobs, which are high paying, globally competitive jobs, we can bring our rural economy into balance. And what I mean by balance is today the village exports only agricultural commodities, imports everything else from the rest of the world, including India. But from the village perspective, it's import. We're buying motorcycles, we're buying smartphones and the like, but we have only rice to give, or rice and maybe some vegetables to give. And that's not enough. That's not balance. But bringing these 10 jobs in 1,000-person village, 1%, which are globally competitive, brings back balance. To me, that is how the new normal looks like. We have to think thoughts like this, and this does not require any sophisticated economic theory at all to understand. Simply understand from a thermodynamic, like our second semester in our IIT thermodynamic class, look at what is coming in, what's going out of a village. You can immediately see the problem. It's not required any understanding of economics to see it, because if what goes out is not enough to buy all the things that are coming in, we are pledging the land, we are giving up ourselves, we are all of that. We are pledging our souls. So that is what is happening. And to me, the new normal is how to address the imbalances that have come up in the last 20 years or 30 years of the old normal. The old normal has created massive imbalances. The new normal has to correct it. And that is itself an entrepreneurial opportunity. That's a massive opportunity. I'm doing all these village experiments, not just as a philanthropic initiative, even though there is part of that, also as a business venture that I believe actually will make us a stronger company. That's why we are doing it. So.
And I think what the story you make of this rural urban imbalance is a global story. It's not just an Indian story.
Not just
The
India.
US, I mean, also the same applies, right? So
That,
there's something for our global audiences as well there. I think just to pick on that one point, and then we'll move on to another. One of the questions we hear when you say, why don't you move this to a village near Tanjavur, is schools and hospitals. So we expect the schools and hospitals to precede opportunities and employment, but what you're saying is it should actually be the other way.
It's other way. As people move in with high pay, automatically the services happen. And it's not true in southern India. Within, for example, I can get to a good, decent hospital within about 20, 30 minutes drive, which is about the same in Chennai when you think about it. It takes about at least 30 minutes to get to a decent hospital, at least, maybe
Sure.
longer. So it's not, so I think within 30 minutes, wherever, even in Tenkasi, in a remote village, I could get to a hospital in about 30 minutes. So it's not, and there are schools all over the landscape now. In fact, within probably a 5-minute drive, you can find a CBSE school here.
Sure.
So, not that I actually don't believe in those schools, but I'm just saying, if that's your taste, you have those schools. So,
Yeah, and this working from home is a big boost to that whole thinking, isn't it, Sridhar?
yes. And it's a boost. This year has exposed a lot of the assumptions we had about you have to locate the job in a urban big industrial park or a park kind of thing, but we can do the work from anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm addressing this from our rural office, and we have a RailTel link, fiber link, and it's working just fine. We are able to get work done here. So,
Sure, sure. So let's talk a little bit more about the typical entrepreneurship scenario, and you've defined it in a big way with Zoho. The typical entrepreneur thinking says, good idea, market ready idea, move in, show a proof of concept, get some seed capital, angel money, then move in, get your round one, round two, the series A, series B, series C, series F. I have not heard, there's no end to it after that. You've completely defined that whole thinking.
I just summarize it as Series 2E. It's all quantitative easing, Federal Reserve balance sheet that's driving it. So there is no Series A, B, C, D, E. There's only Series QE now.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about specifically the Indian funding scenario, Indian venture capital scenario. And first of all, I mean, you've done it without venture capital money. So first, do you believe everybody can do it, or only some ideas are the way Zoho can be built? And secondly, can it be done with the money that we have available within India?
Yeah. Both actually, I'd say it's always possible to bootstrap a company if you have enough time, if you give yourself enough room, you can make it very, very big. There's no question in my mind. Because you are building stage by stage the capital required for the next stage. That's what we've been doing all along. Today, we have capital required to build a even much bigger company than we are today. We have the capital. That's the capital that we built up ourselves, right, over the process. So you can actually do this. And it's true across many industries. I mean, you go scout around the world for examples, you'll find numerous examples of people who have done it even in seemingly highly capital intensive industries. But they wouldn't have started in that particular industry, but something adjacent and then moved into it. So you can build up capital. And then this notion of capital itself, I want to clarify this. I look around this village. There's at least 200 young men and women who are desperate for jobs in this one village, and neighboring villages. You add up, within probably about a 10-15 kilometer radius in this Tanjavur district, I can round up a couple of thousand people who desperately need a job today. I can hire them. How many do you want? Now, putting that talent to work, that raw talent, that human energy to work is capital building. That is capital building. That's all there is to it. So the job of the entrepreneur is to figure out how do we put all this surplus talent, surplus labor we have in our country. And India is the largest surplus labor country in the world right now, by far. So that presents an immense opportunity for people with that bent of how do I use this talent to create some value? And that is possible. And that actually there is a role model here. I'll give you a concrete example. There was this person named Hendricks, and he ran this company called ABC Roofing Supply in rural Wisconsin in the US. And I studied his history. His goal was to create employment in those rural counties in Wisconsin, which, as you know, in the US, rural areas have been decimated of jobs and the same problem as in India. So he set himself to build enough companies to employ all those people. And he died, unfortunately, too young, but he died as a multi-billionaire. but having built all these companies. And his purpose in creating those companies is to employ the local, is in his local counties, the talent that was available, that was going without jobs. Even today, we actually have started rural offices in the US and we find talent that we don't know where they come from, but people are desperate for jobs in the US, in rural counties. We actually have experienced it in Zoho firsthand. And this is magnified 20-fold, 100-fold in India, in the Indian context. So that is why I actually believe that we have to address this problem. That is to me the biggest opportunity in India today. How do we address this problem?
I think that human capital, excess of human capital is something we see even in the education system. We have almost 2,500 PhD students, who are paid 30,000 rupees a month. That's a government scholarship. An MIT or a university, Caltech has also 2,500 PhD students. They may pay them differently, but the human capital is actually not exchangeable like a dollar to a rupee. And I think that's the fundamental difference between where India stands today and where the typical equations. I think, back to entrepreneurship and to think of the Indian way of entrepreneurship. The Prime Minister has talked extensively about the Atmanirbhar Bharat campaign. What does that mean for an entrepreneur? I mean, as I move forward, how do I think of myself? If I am one that believes in Atmanirbhar Bharat, as an entrepreneur, what are some things I should be doing and avoiding?
Yeah. So this Atmanirbhar Bharat comes from that imbalance I talked about. That we consume a lot of technologies, we consume a lot of advanced goods, and we don't have the capacity to produce. There's almost a spiritual message from our yogis here. Our very wants will enslave us if we don't conquer them. And in this case, the wants are the smartphones and all of the MRI machines, all of that we want. And the conquering means that we have to master the knowledge involved in this, know-how involved in it. And we have smart people, we have all the engineers, we have IITs, we have all of this. We can do this. I mean, if we set out a program today to build a domestic homemade MRI machine, it's probably 5 to 10 years we can have a world-class one. I have no doubt in my mind.
Absolutely.
We should set out to build a search engine. We should set out to build Twitter. We should set out to build all of this. I mean, within 3 months, Zoho will have actually our own AV tools that will be definitely on par or better than Zoom. I promise. We actually are testing it inside. In fact, in about a year, I would refuse to participate in Zoom meetings myself. It has to be Zoho, then only I'll participate.
Sure.
So that is how actually we are building all this. To me, that's what Atmanirbhar looks like. Okay, looks like all this, and we are actually building a lot of these ourselves now. And I'm sure the resources, the energy, the drive, the engineering skills, potential skills, and all of this underemployed or unemployed talent that just wants an opportunity, all of that is there. We just have to go out and do it. Now is the time I see the entrepreneurs to not make excuses. Not this policy, not that tax incentive, not this concession. None of that matter, actually. We didn't build anything in this company because there was a tax incentive available. We built it because we wanted to build it, that's all. And R&D is actually, in a sense, cheap. I mean, I'll give you an example. Salesforce paid $30 billion for Slack. Zoho Click, our competitive platform, probably cost us $30-40 million. It's a factor of 1,000. Somebody is an idiot here, I tell you. I don't think that's me. So
Right. I think that factor of 1,000 or 100, whatever it is has come out to become almost like a fact of life. It's now become like a truth of life. In other words, you pay. My son just bought some textbooks for the same textbook. The Indian version is 600 and something rupees. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you better.
Okay. So this factor of 100 seems to become, has come to become enshrined like a fact of reality. That, a textbook in India costs 600 rupees. The same textbook in the US costs $70. I mean, nobody can explain why the same book, okay, whether it's an Indian author or an American author, costs differently in different places. And what you're talking about between Slack and Click is something of that same kind. So what that also points to is that there's a fundamental, or does it point to a fundamental difference in the expectations of the standard of life? There's minimum wages in the different countries that that are this kind of a factor?
Actually, a lot of it. Yeah, a lot of it is monetary factors, not really even standard of living. I'll give you an example. Our office here would be as comfortable as an office in Silicon Valley.
Hmm.
I mean, it looks reasonably cool. All the modern touches are there, conveniences, all that is there. And the bathrooms, everything is as good. And we have conference rooms, the projectors, all of that. So the setting is good. It just looks a little more rural, and that is deliberate. We kept it to our flavor of how the architecture should be. But it's very convenient and comfortable. And yet it would cost, if we were to rent out something like this, it would cost us maybe 10, 20 rupees per month, 10 rupees maybe. While in San Francisco, it might be $10 a month.
Hmm.
10 rupees a month and $10 a month, or $8 a month.
Yeah.
So you are talking about a factor of, again, 50 or 100 there, right? That factor is monetary forces. And a lot of it is the imbalances that have built up, that destroying those imbalances is the opportunity. Competing with San Francisco from here is the opportunity. I'm telling you. Competing with San Francisco companies from here is a massive opportunity. It should be seized. Like Warren Buffett would say, when you see an opportunity like that, you back up a truck and buy. So I am backing up a truck and going around rural areas and hiring as much talent as I can. That's what I'm doing right now. That's why I'm traveling all around the rural Tamil Nadu landscape now.
Sure.
So
Sure. I think there is a model that can be replicated by others. You know, the opportunity is just humongous in terms of what is scalable. Let's talk a little bit about the whole the training of this workforce. I mean, you made a good point that human capital is our biggest asset. Now, how well trained are they? Like let's say you talked of the 2,000 youth that you can round up around Tanjavur. On day 0 versus, let's say, day 100, what do you need to do? What are some essential skills that you need to impart? Or are there even skills that you need to impart? Is it just a matter of giving them a bit of self-confidence? What is it that is
it's
missing?
both. I would immediately put them on projects. That's how we do it. We start projects, we start building things, small things at first, and then bigger things. And along with it, the self-esteem grows that we can build this. And that's how our engineers learned. Actually, the entire history of Zoho is we start building increasingly sophisticated software. In fact, about 7 months ago, I challenged our team. We have to build a more scalable system than Zoom. And we are setting ourselves the challenge. We did that to our team, and they actually demonstrated a prototype just a couple of weeks ago. So we have actually come very far in that. This is the kind of thing where you need to create that drive and energy, and then along with it, provide the environment where people can learn fast. That environment is important. Maybe 1 or 2 experienced people who can explain things to them. And the engineers, rural or urban, have to have the confidence that the leadership is behind me. The leadership will support me all the way. That is important. And so that's all the environment I provide, and then the magic happens. Actually, that's how the magic happens here.
You know, it's a bit like Dhoni's captaincy. He backs his failure players through 1 or 2 series so they come back and perform again. I think back to the way you've built Zoho's products, um, they've all targeted specific business needs, and you've used talent where you are, talent from areas that you feel need to be served, and you've built these companies. This model, is this sustainable? Is this something that is scalable into manufacturing? Because that's when the US developed their rural areas, manufacturing was their driver force. It went into all of these little counties, and there were manufacturing plants set up that provided employment, non-agricultural employment. We don't see that in India. We've kind of almost leapfrogged to become a service economy right away. Is that good or bad in a way?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Actually, one of the problems. Um, so it seems like my connection is a little bit
No,
unstable.
your connection is good. I'm able to hear you well, Sridhar.
You can hear? Okay.
I can hear you well. Can you hear me as well?
Yeah, good. Yeah. No, actually, when your voice was breaking up a little bit, that's why I was wondering.
Okay.
But I heard the gist of the question. So
Yeah.
the Our problem in India is our business world has been dominated by the trading mindset. I call it the trader mindset.
Hmm.
So what I mean is you buy things and you sell things at a profit and you want to turn that over quickly. You don't want your money locked up in that inventory. That's what I call the trader mindset. But in something like R&D, your money is locked up in the R&D project for a long time. Could be 5 years, could be 10 years. You're investing without a return, right? This mindset is not there in our industry, by and large. When you come from a trading mindset, it's very difficult to move to the making mindset. How do we make these things? For example, our LTE chip that we designed in Signal Chip, our subsidiary that designs semiconductors, it has taken about 7-8 years long project to get this far. And that it takes that long to master LTE and produce a world-class chipset. And in the same way, our AV systems or our chat systems or any of these are long-term investments. Our Office suite software, all of that in Zoho. And sustaining that is not just money, because I'll give you an example. I mean, I'm very familiar with the industrial landscape now because having met a lot of businessmen. And recently one businessman was asking me, how do I fund R&D in this area? I asked him, how big a home do you want? He said, he was a little squeamish and told me, I spent 60 crores on my latest house. I told him, a 6 crore house would have done the same good to you. The remaining money you could have invested in R&D, right? I asked him. He said, well, I didn't think of it that way at all. I said, maybe you should think of it that way.
Yeah.
I actually told him, maybe you should think of it that way.
Yeah.
Then I pointed to the Benz car he was driving and I said, how much is that? It's about 1 crore. I said, a 20 lakh car would do you just fine, okay? It will get you around just fine. The remaining 80 lakhs, how many engineers could you have hired? How much R&D could you have done? Why don't you think like that? I asked him. That's R&D budget right there.
Yeah.
You can cut the personal consumption out because your 60 crore house and 6 crore house are not going to give you much utility difference. 10 times the utility you're not going to get out of.
Yeah.
You're wasting money. You would have felt that you're wasting money.
Yeah.
And driving around a Benz, 1 crore Benz in our traffic, what's the point? Why not drive a cheaper car and then put the money into? Yeah, I told him because he asked me. I said, I guess I'm too blunt sometimes, but that's why people come to me, because I'm blunt. So I told him, maybe that's your R&D budget right there.
Absolutely.
First, liberate that funds, then we will talk about where the money will come from.
Right. So, I think that's exactly in some sense, there is no dearth of money as such in India, leave alone human capital. But even just hard capital, I think we have enough to bootstrap our way as a country through some of the basic engineering needs that we have. Let's say, our electronics needs. Yeah. You've now ventured into electronics manufacturing and design development and manufacturing. We do have enough capital just within the country, right? We don't have to worry about that a lot.
If we channelize properly, we do have enough capital.
Yeah,
that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
In fact, this is where I take issue with these our trade gurus, some of our trade economists who say that we need capital inflow in order to grow. That's actually not true.
That's
not Japan true. And all these countries do without it, actually. So.
Yeah. And there are many examples like Japan. You're right. So moving on, exactly. You are a Japan big proponent of business culture. You say you are always a proponent of building a culture within the business, and Zoho is obviously an example of a country. One example that comes to my mind is employee mindset when they take a job in your company. It is there to retire as opposed to learn something and move on. There's a culture. So talk a little bit, please, about the different cultures you see in large businesses in India. We have, dozens and dozens of fairly large business houses that have now emerged in the last 20, 25 years that have taken on their own cultural identities. Where do you see all of this evolving, and what is the Indian strain of culture, if there is one such thing?
Yeah. I'll actually talk about a classic example, Sony. As you know, Sony, has been a player forever in the electronics industry, and lately they've actually gone down in their global market recognition, but still they are a very viable, profitable company. And the reason it turns out, take this smartphone, this iPhone, this actually has a Sony camera in it. And that kind of camera, that state-of-the-art smartphone camera is extremely hard to do. Only two companies in the world can do it. Sony is one of them. So there is about 10 billion of revenue from this alone for Sony. I think 10 billion or plus. I think it could be even profit, operating profit. I may be remembering it wrong. So Sony's R&D for about 40 or 50 years in this area, cameras, is paying off big in the smartphone market. But Sony itself is not a big player in the smartphone segment. They tried, but they have not succeeded. But the camera market, they won for the smartphones. So this is a classic example where the R&D, long-term R&D has paid off. And I really wish that Indian corporate houses would pay attention to these lessons. What is an R&D, what we are doing for these 40 years, 50 years in our country? I can't think of too many. And yet, our business houses do have the capital to nurture the R&D. You have talent, people willing to do the work. I mean, ISRO is an example of that long-term nurturing of R&D that has paid off big dividends in the space arena. We should be doing it in cameras. We should be doing it in MR emissions. We should be doing it in electric cars, in electric motors. For example, even electric motors, the electric auto rickshaw I bought, the motor actually came from China. So we know how to make motors here. Why don't we make it? That's R&D. We need to do that R&D. And that's the part that's missing. And we have to get that R&D culture in. And we only have mostly a trader culture that I will buy and I'll sell and for a quick profit. And we have to take the trading profits and invest in R&D. That is what India needs to do in its business world. So for that, R&D culture is necessary. Building that culture is necessary.
You know, one of the thought processes that goes into making an R&D plan is an integrated business plan in some way. So on day zero, before even you start out doing research, the corporate leadership is typically out there asking this question: what will this product cost when it is done, and will it compete? Now, I think that's probably, is it, you feel, coming from the trader mindset? Because some of these things will get solved along the way. You cannot ask that question before even you start doing something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, my being an engineer and working in R&D directly helps me see that how much intrinsic, unavoidable uncertainty is there in these projects.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that cannot be forecast. In fact, I gave a presentation to a project management group, Project Management Institute recently, where I said, think of R&D projects not as trains running on time, but as laying a track through an unknown terrain. So think of it as laying a track through unknown terrain rather than making the trains run on time. Because the trains running on time analogy totally fails in R&D, totally fails. It cannot work. So that is the reason why we run R&D totally differently. We try not to forecast when the product will come out or how much market will gain, but we try to look at milestones of what we have achieved in terms of the project we set out to do. Does this software work? Can it actually solve a problem? Those kinds of things, and let the market take care of itself over time. And we have to take those risks. In our industry, we have to take those risks. And that risk capital is what today is being diverted to, I would call it conspicuous consumption. And we have to talk about these subjects. I think it's not socialism to talk about these subjects. Japanese talked about these subjects. The Japanese had a resolution. As long as we are a poor country, we are not going to indulge in conspicuous consumption. Our elite layer, and I include myself in it, owe a responsibility to this country to actually be responsible in our consumption and divert the resources towards investment, R&D, all of that. That's a responsibility we all have. That's what I would say.
So last line of thought I want to extract out of you is about Atmanirbhar Bharat and our own defense systems, our own defense forces and the technologies that go into defending our country. Clearly, we are the world's largest importer of arms and ammunition in the world. What are some things we can do as technocrats, as people, as responsible citizens of this country, and as young alumni who are watching and students? What are some things we can do in that space? It's ripe for the pluckings in many ways, but we seem to be missing several pieces. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
So today our national security depends on mastery of technologies.
Yeah.
Everything from our protection of our vital infrastructure from cyber crimes, from hacking, all of that, that is national security now. Our banking system being sound because our software underlying it has to be sound, secure, all of that is national security now. And then it's true in high-tech weapons, all of that. And AI has to be there in our missile program, all of these, which means we need absolutely a domestic capability in this. Today, we are assuming that we can buy this from friendly countries, but given the way the configuration of the world is, India is not a permanent member of the UN Security Council. So our situation is always precarious. Our security situation, we have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
We cannot trust other major powers to defend us in the event of something. So we have to take care of our own interests. In fact, I go further. I would argue that we have no business belonging to UN when we are not a permanent member. I mean, I've said this very radical thought. India does need to be a permanent member. If it's not, maybe we should think about exiting this. Okay. These are the kinds of radical thoughts we need to do as a country, self-confident thoughts. We should start being supplicants and we should stand up for ourselves. This is what the Chinese did. And we can actually do this. And the world needs us as much as we need the world.
Yeah.
And we'll come around to some, compromise on this question. But given our population, given the contribution we make to the world, India is most deserving of permanent membership in UN. And that's very vital for our security interests, very vital to protect our nation. So these are the kinds of things that we have to be doing the thinking.
Well, Sridhar, that's been a fantastic conversation about what we can do with the human talent we have and laying out a pathway, with research as the basis. I think we have time for a few questions. Lata, can you start bringing up the questions from the audience?
Yeah. Yes, please. I think everybody is having a great session. And I think everybody has passed on their messages and regards to Sridhar and you. So there's one question which asks, how can EVs go frugal?
Electric vehicles.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry.
If we want to talk of EV manufacturing in India, we are not. I mean, what are some things? What are your thoughts on that?
Can you repeat it? I heard the last part.
The electric vehicle manufacturing, or how can EVs go frugal in India?
We actually have invested in a company that is doing electric motorcycles already, and we have done that, and we are actually also investing in battery technology right now. I strongly believe in that sector. I nudge these companies to think rural also. I say that don't think only in terms of motorcycles, think in terms of auto rickshaws, share autos, all that. Electric vans for rural transport. So I encourage them to think of those thoughts as well, not just motorcycles for personal use, but also these kind of auto rickshaws and the like. And that is actually important for our market, and I actually strongly believe it. We have to master the technologies ground up. The motors, the battery cells, the controllers, and someday even the self-driving aspects of it. In fact, I've envisioned an electric auto where I attach my smartphone to this thing and it starts driving itself, because the software, the map capability, all that here will drive the car, drive the auto. Those types of things on rural roads. This should be very feasible. And there is enough data in the vehicle, enough data in the cloud, all of that together, we can actually drive it at our speeds, because our speeds are also low. So it's not very dangerous. So these things should be possible. And all these technologies we must master, and some of these we will be investing ourselves.
Well, thank you, Sridhar. I think you are a very unique and wonderful person. You are a distinguished and we are very proud of you as an alumnus of IIT Madras. You've set up a role model company in many ways, and we want to thank you for your time and sharing your thoughts on this forum. I think over to you, Lata.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Mahesh. I think that was, there are many comments on your lovely questions too. And thank you, Sridhar. And there are people who feel very gifted listening to you today. And, we have been using our Zoho Showtime for at least last 2 years for all our online programming. And the next Sangam, we hope to be on the new platform of Zoho also. Yeah, so thank you, Sridhar. Thank you, Professor Mahesh, for this.
Thank you all. Thank you.